Libya's biggest economic decision in decades appeared quietly, as a single line in financial news. A 25-year oil agreement signed with two Western energy giants. Not a loan, not a short-term project. A deal that runs until 2051. Longer than most Libyan governments have survived. Longer than the civil war itself. Longer than the country has been politically unified. The strange part isn't the money. It's the silence. No one explained what exactly was promised, who approved it, or how a country still divided by militias could guarantee anything for a quarter of a century. If Libya is finally recovering, why does its future already belong to contracts written today? Let's find out. What lasts in Libya is not peace, not governments, not alliances, not even borders. What lasts is paper. The kind of paper that does not care who is in power, who is fighting whom, or which flag flies over which building. The kind of paper that survives coups, survives revolutions, survives international condemnation, and survives entire generations of political failure. That paper is the contract. Once the deal was signed through Waha Oil Company, it stopped being a Libyan decision and became an international legal object. From that moment on, Libya's oil operations were no longer governed primarily by Libyan politics, but by clauses, arbitration frameworks, insurance structures, and financial guarantees written into a system that exists outside the country itself. This is the part most people miss. Libya did not promise oil. Libya promised behavior. It promised that for the next 25 years, regardless of what happens inside the country, its most valuable economic activity would follow a pre-written script. Production targets, investment schedules, cost recovery formulas, profit-sharing ratios, dispute mechanisms, all of it locked in advance, immune to future political moods. That means something very specific. Every future Libyan government is born already constrained. Even if a new leadership comes to power with a completely different ideology, they cannot redesign the oil sector. They can only operate inside the contract they inherited. They can tweak margins. They can renegotiate small terms. But they cannot change the core structure without triggering massive legal and financial consequences. In effect, the contract became the most stable institution in Libya. More stable than the constitution, more stable than the army, more stable than elections. And unlike governments, contracts don't collapse. They don't resign. They don't get overthrown. They don't respond to protests. They don't feel hunger, anger, or legitimacy crises. They simply continue. This is why the duration matters more than the money. 25 years is not an economic decision. It is a generational decision. It determines how children who are not yet born will experience the economy they inherit. It determines what kind of industries can exist, what kind of investments make sense, what kind of education becomes valuable, and what kind of future is even imaginable. When a resource is locked for that long, it stops being a national asset and becomes a pre-committed system. Libya is not planning with oil anymore. Libya is planning around oil. And planning around something you do not control is very different from owning it. This is why the deal does not require Libya to become stable. It requires the contract to remain stable. As long as the paperwork holds, everything else can fluctuate. Governments can fail, militias can fight, borders can shift. None of that automatically cancels the agreement. In other words, Libya can fall apart again, and the oil will still belong to the same legal logic. Which leads to the uncomfortable realization. The deal is not built on trust in Libya's future. It is built on indifference to it. So the real question isn't whether Libya will benefit from this agreement. The real question is, who designs contracts that function better than entire countries? The answer is simple. Companies that were never built for stable countries in the first place. Total Energies and ConocoPhillips are not specialists in prosperity. They are specialists in volatility. Their real expertise is not drilling. It is operating inside places where laws are weak, politics are divided, and governments cannot guarantee anything on their own. That's why their global footprint looks the way it does. Iraq, Angola, Nigeria, Venezuela, Chad, Libya before 2011, Libya after 2011. The same pattern repeats everywhere. A country collapses, investors leave, the system rots, and then these companies return first. Not because things are better, but because things are cheap again. The key is not oil. It is the legal structure. Their contracts are not governed by local courts. They are governed by international arbitration systems in London, New York, and Paris. Which means the agreement does not depend on Libyan law to survive. It depends on foreign legal institutions that operate regardless of what happens on the ground. If a new Libyan government tries to cancel the deal, it doesn't become a political fight. It becomes a lawsuit. And lawsuits at this level are not symbolic. They involve frozen assets, blocked accounts, trade sanctions, and multi-billion-dollar compensation claims. So the companies don't need to control Libya. They only need to control the paper around Libya. This is why instability is not a threat to them. It is a feature. A weak state cannot negotiate aggressively. A divided parliament cannot coordinate resistance. A government that needs revenue cannot afford delays. And the more desperate the country becomes, the more reasonable the contract looks. In that sense, this deal is not designed to function during peace. It is designed to function through disorder. No matter who holds Tripoli, no matter which faction controls Benghazi, no matter which militia blocks which road, as long as the contract exists, the oil remains economically obedient. This is why these companies return after wars, not before them. The post-war moment is when national bargaining power is at its lowest. Infrastructure is broken. Budgets are empty. Legitimacy is fragile. Foreign firms arrive not as partners, but as structural anchors, the only actors capable of generating revenue at scale. Once embedded, they become impossible to remove without collapsing the entire system they are propping up. The country becomes financially dependent on the very structures that limit its freedom. And this is the trap. Libya does not need these companies because they are powerful. Libya needs them because it has been made weak. The deal looks voluntary, but it is negotiated under economic pressure, political fragmentation, and institutional exhaustion. It is not a contract between equals. It is a contract between survival and leverage, which leads to the next layer of control, the one that actually determines whether Libya exists as a functioning economy at all. What part of the country even needs to operate for this entire system to work? Libya looks big on the map. Endless desert, long coastline, dozens of cities, rival governments, militias, flags, borders, alliances. But in economic reality, Libya is tiny, because almost the entire country collapses into just two physical points, Ras Lanuf and Al Sidra. These are not just oil terminals, they are conversion machines. This is where oil stops being a natural resource and becomes money. Until crude passes through these ports, it is useless. It cannot pay salaries, it cannot stabilize the currency, it cannot import food or fuel, it cannot even exist in the global system. Everything Libya calls an economy is switched on or off right here. This is why every major Libyan crisis eventually leads to the same headlines. Oil exports halted, terminals blockaded, production suspended, not parliament dissolved, not government reshuffled, not constitution challenged. Because none of that matters if tankers stop loading. When Ras Lanuf and Al Sidra close, Libya becomes financially blind and deaf. No foreign currency, no revenue, no leverage. The country can still exist politically, but it no longer exists economically. That's why militias don't fight over ministries, they fight over ports. That's why governments don't collapse when elections fail. They collapse when terminals shut down. And that's why foreign companies do not negotiate with politicians first. They negotiate with whoever guarantees access to these two locations. Real power in Libya is not ideological. It is logistical. You don't need to control the country. You just need to keep these two places functioning. Once they work, everything else becomes background noise. This is the silent architecture of the deal. The contract does not require Libya to become unified. It does not require national reconciliation. It does not require strong institutions or public trust. It only requires continuous operation of two export nodes, protected by security agreements, satellite monitoring, and international shipping insurance. In other words, Libya does not need to be a state. It only needs to be a pipeline with a flag. This is why every so-called recovery plan starts with terminals, pipelines, and production targets. From the perspective of the global energy system, Libya is not a society to be rebuilt. It is an interface, a surface where underground resources meet global markets. As long as that interface works, the country can remain politically fragmented forever and still be economically useful, which leads to the most uncomfortable realization so far. Libya's sovereignty is not exercised through laws, elections, or borders. It is exercised through infrastructure access. Whoever controls Ras Lanuf and Al-Sidra controls whether Libya lives or starves financially. And this is exactly the layer foreign companies embed themselves into. Not politics, not culture, not society, but the physical choke points where the nation turns into revenue. So the deal doesn't stabilize Libya as a country. It stabilizes two machines. And once those machines are secured, nothing else becomes essential, which raises the next question. If Libya only needs two ports to function economically, why does every recovery plan ignore everything else? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. People are slow, machines are fast. When a country collapses, rebuilding society takes decades. You need schools, trust, institutions, courts, engineers, planners, doctors, and administrators. You need time, patience, and political stability. But rebuilding extraction takes months. You only need security around a few locations, foreign engineers, spare parts, insurance, and shipping lanes. That's why recovery always starts with oil. Not because oil is the most important thing for a nation, but because oil is the only thing that can function without a nation. Pipelines do not need elections. Terminals do not need legitimacy. Tankers do not need social contracts. They only need to move. This is why Libya's recovery plan is almost entirely physical. New drilling equipment, modernized terminals, protected supply routes, and foreign technical teams. The human layer, education, industrial training, research, and manufacturing is absent because it does not generate immediate returns, and it cannot be controlled through contracts. Foreign companies don't invest in people because people can revolt. Machines can't. So Libya is being rebuilt as an export surface, not as a productive society. Oil leaves the ground, passes through two ports, enters foreign markets, and returns as imported food, imported fuel, imported goods, and imported services. The country does not create value. It rents its geography. And this is the most dangerous form of recovery, because it feels like progress while locking the structure in place. Salaries get paid, electricity stabilizes, shops refill, calm returns, but underneath, nothing has changed. The economy still has no internal engine. Libya becomes functional without becoming capable. This is why foreign capital prefers post-war environments. There is no resistance to this model. No strong unions. No national industrial class. No organized demand for technology transfer. Only urgency, debt, and desperation. The country doesn't negotiate from a position of power. It negotiates for survival. So the recovery narrative becomes upside down. Instead of asking, what kind of Libya do we want to build? The system asks, what kind of Libya can keep exports flowing? And once that question is answered, everything else becomes optional. Which brings us to the illusion this deal creates. Libya will look better. GDP will rise. Production will increase. International media will call it a comeback story. But none of that indicates strength. It indicates usefulness. Useful countries are calm. Strong countries are dangerous. Useful countries. Strong countries negotiate. Libya is being shaped to be reliable, not powerful. Predictable, not sovereign. Stable enough to extract, but never strong enough to redesign the system it has been inserted into. So the recovery is real, but it is not for Libya. It is for the global system that Libya needs to function as a resource interface. Which leads to the next question. What kind of stability keeps a country alive while preventing it from ever becoming strong? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The stability this deal creates is not the kind that builds nations. It is the kind that keeps systems running. Libya will not collapse tomorrow. That's the promise. Oil will flow. Salaries will be paid. Imports will continue. The currency will survive. On the surface, everything will look calmer than it has in years. No dramatic shortages, no sudden blackouts, no visible economic panic. But this calm is not coming from strength. It is coming from dependence. Because once the deal is active, Libya's entire financial rhythm becomes synchronized with one external process: how efficiently foreign firms extract and export oil. If they slow down, Libya slows down. If they suspend operations, Libya freezes. If they renegotiate costs, Libya absorbs the shock. The country stops controlling its economy and starts monitoring it. This is what stability means here. Not self-sufficiency, not resilience, just continuous operation inside someone else's machinery. Libya will not decide how oil is priced. That happens in foreign trading hubs. Libya will not decide how disputes are settled. That happens in foreign courts. Libya will not decide how profits are reinvested. That happens in corporate boardrooms. Libya's role becomes purely mechanical. Keep the environment safe enough for extraction. Keep the terminals open. Keep the contracts honored. Everything else becomes secondary. This is why the deal produces calm without power. Because power requires alternatives. Power requires the ability to say no. Power requires industries that don't collapse when one sector stops. Libya will have none of that. There will be no industrial layer to fall back on. No manufacturing base. No regional energy grid leadership. No technological ownership. No pricing block with neighbors. No internal value chain. Just a single artery feeding a foreign system. And the more stable that artery becomes, the harder it becomes to replace it. Every year that passes makes Libya more dependent on the same flow, more optimized for extraction, and less capable of imagining any other economic structure. This is the quiet trap. The deal doesn't make Libya weak by destroying it. It makes Libya weak by preserving it exactly as it is. A country that survives, but cannot evolve. A country that functions, but cannot transform. A country that exists, but does not command. From the outside, it will look like success. From the inside, it will feel like stasis. Nothing collapses, but nothing escapes. Libya becomes permanently recovering. Always better than yesterday, never different from today. And this kind of stability is the most difficult to resist, because it doesn't hurt enough to provoke rebellion. It provides just enough comfort to suppress urgency, just enough order to delay reform, just enough income to postpone structural change, which means the real danger is not chaos. The real danger is a system that works so smoothly that no one feels compelled to challenge it. So the question becomes unavoidable. What happens to a country that survives long enough to realize it has been stabilized into a role it can never leave? The contract ends in 2051. That date doesn't appear in speeches. It doesn't appear in headlines. It doesn't appear to be optimistic. But it is the only date that actually matters, because everything Libya is doing now is being optimized for a world that will not exist then. By 2051, oil will no longer be the center of global power. Not because oil will disappear, but because it will lose its political gravity. Carbon taxes will dominate trade. Climate litigation will reshape corporate behavior. Electric grids, hydrogen systems, and digital energy markets will define influence. Fossil infrastructure will still exist, but it will be treated as a legacy sector, something to be managed, not expanded. And that's the trap. Libya is signing a 25-year deal in the final profitable phase of the oil era, which means the country is not entering the future of energy. It is being positioned to exit the past of energy. For the next 2 decades, Libya will export as much oil as possible, as fast as possible, under terms written for a declining industry. When the contract expires, the reserves will be lower, the infrastructure will be aging, and the strategic value of oil itself will be collapsing. Libya will not emerge as an energy power. it will emerge as a former supplier in a world that has already moved on. This is the part no one says directly. The deal is not designed to prepare Libya for the next economy. It is designed to extract the maximum value before the transition is complete. Once the transition finishes, Libya is left holding depleted fields, obsolete terminals, no industrial base, no technological leverage, no alternative sectors. The country will have experience in exporting raw materials, but no ownership of the systems that replace them. In other words, Libya is being scheduled to remain relevant just long enough to be emptied. This is not accidental. Long-term resource contracts always end this way. The host country enters at the peak of global demand and exits just as demand collapses. The corporations leave with profits, data, infrastructure knowledge, and diversified portfolios. The country is left with a sunset industry and no bridge to the next one. So the real cost of the deal is not what Libya gives up today. The real cost is what Libya will not have the chance to build while it still has leverage. Because the only time a resource-rich country can negotiate its future is when the world still needs what it has. Once demand falls, bargaining power disappears. Technology moves elsewhere. Investment dries up. Attention shifts. Libya is spending that window on extraction instead of transformation, which means that when the contract ends, Libya will not be asking how to grow. It will be asking how to replace an industry that defined its entire economy for half a century. And by then, the world will not be waiting. So the final question is not about oil. The final question is, why does Africa always sign its longest contracts at the exact moment its greatest leverage is about to expire? Let us know in the comment section. Is Libya's future sold? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.